Time Magazine and the Washington Post today both had pieces out sort of making the accusation, again, the Washington Post, that the president's afraid Democrats can't really defend this in town hall meetings leading up to the midterms, and the Democrats might actually lose the Senate.
Yeah, you know, Ezra Klein of the Washington Post, who's one of the law's biggest supporters, had said back in 2009 that this is the worst idea in health care reform, to force employers to cover people. Why? Because of all the things that you mentioned. It discriminates against lower-income people, because those are the people, if you hire low-income people, that's going to cause you to have more penalties as an employer. It requires all people to drop coverage. It requires people to drop hiring, right? So it's a terrible idea. And if you love the law, if you're a fan of Obamacare, you don't need the employer mandate to make it work. It was only put in there to game the Congressional Budget Office scores so that they could say that they were expanding coverage to more people.
But we saw this during the last round of elections, that the president sort of put on the shelf some of these coal regulations and carbon regulations. Didn't want to upset people in Ohio, then rolled them out after he was safely reelected. When you look at this delay, isn't that kind of like admitting that you know this isn't very popular? You don't even have the exchanges to set up to run on time, that this is kind of a train wreck, and now you want to protect members of Congress. I mean, what the president is saying to me is, I know this is not a good idea, but I'm not willing to have it scrapped.
Well, you know, Valerie Jarrett, who's one of the big counselors to the president, had a blog post at the White House blog, and the headline was, "We're listening to business." We're not necessarily listening to America, but we're listening to business, and we're making sure that businesses that have complained about the employer mandate are going to get some relief. But for a year. Right, and the real question here is,
after
will
the
this
Democrats
continue?
are safely reelected,
yeah, what will happen next? So is this going to be one of those zombie provisions like the Class Act that never gets implemented because businesses aren't going to just stop fighting against the employer mandate in 2014? They're going to continue to fight. They're going to smell blood in the water and say, let's repeal this employer mandate. There's a bill that's been introduced in Congress in the House and the Senate to repeal the employer mandate. Let's have a vote to repeal the employer mandate. I bet you a lot of Democrats would support it.
Isn't there actual language in the Obamacare legislation that has fixed start dates? So how does the president, is he going to use an executive order or something, how does he just end around the legislation that he signed into law?
Yeah, so I put this on my Forbes blog yesterday. It says right there in print, this provision goes effective after December 31, 2013. So in 2014, it's in the statute. How does the administration just sort of wake up and say, oh, we don't care what the statute says, we're going to implement this whenever we want? It's a bit odd, and some people have been looking into that today. I've talked to some legal people. It's complicated because, you know, yes, that's what the statute says, and the administration should implement that. But if the administration doesn't implement that, it's not obvious that anyone's going to be able to force them to heed the law.
But couldn't this go back to the Supreme Court and say the government is now in violation of the law? This has not been set up and implemented according to the actual language of the law. And you, John Roberts, referred to this as a taxing power. So you're clear as to how this law works. We want it repealed.
Here's the key. It's not clear who would have standing to sue. So if you're an employer, would you have standing to sue? If you're a worker that doesn't get covered, would you have standing to sue? The people I've talked to today suggest that it's not obvious that there's anyone who has standing to sue, that the federal government is not implementing the employer mandate. So who knows? Maybe there is someone who does, but that's where a lot of the legal question in terms of litigation in the courts and all that, it's hard to see what's going to happen. We don't know.